summer of 1969. The Vietnam War was raging. And U.S. astronauts had taken the first steps on the moon.
One small step for man, giant leap for mankind.
Black radicals calling for an uprising brought racial tension to the boiling point. While 400,000 people attended the Woodstock Festival in upstate New York to celebrate 3 days of peace, love, and music. But across the country, in the San Fernando Valley outside Los Angeles, a group of so-called hippies living on an abandoned movie set called Spahn Ranch were planning a more sinister event. Ex-convict Charles Manson, a self-proclaimed messiah and 34-year-old leader of his ragtag family, wanted to start a revolution.
He's just a very evil, sophisticated con man. Manson had this ability to dominate, but he also wanted to murder. And when you find both of these characteristics, which independently are unusual, but when they coexist in one person, then you have a Hitler type, a Manson.
And the idea was to commit horrible, horrible murders that would incense the white community, so the white community would think that blacks committed the murders, and then they would go down and start killing the blacks.
August 9, 1969, Manson sent 4 of his most trusted followers on their first mission. 23-year-old Charles Tex Watson, a former high school track star. 21-year-old Patricia Krenwinkel, a choir girl who attended a Jesuit college. Linda Kasabian, 19, a hippie who was looking for Jesus. Susan Atkins, also 21, was a topless dancer and a call girl. Around midnight, the 4 family members arrived at 10,050 Cielo Drive. This house in the exclusive Benedict Canyon area of Bel Air was rented by Roman Polanski, the acclaimed European film director, and his beautiful 26-year-old American wife, actress Sharon Tate. Polanski was in Europe. Sharon Tate, who had just returned from London, was 8.5 months pregnant. That evening, she had several house guests keeping her company. Abigail Folger, 25, an heiress to the coffee fortune. Her boyfriend, actor and playboy Voytek Frykowski, 32, and 35-year-old Jay Sebring, a well-known hairstylist and ex-boyfriend of Sharon Tate. Watson cut the phone lines, and the intruders scaled an embankment near the front gate. Before they reached the house, 18-year-old Stephen Parent, a friend of the caretaker, was coming down the driveway in his car.
Watson told the 3 girls to get back in the bushes. He went up to Parent, and he had a 9-inch buntline revolver. And Watson shot him 4 times at point-blank range in the upper body, killing him.
Leaving Linda Kasabian outside as a lookout, Watson, Atkins, and Krenwinkel entered the house through an open window to carry out Charles Manson's plan.
It was so frightening, it was so nightmarish that there were over 100 stab wounds. The victims were screaming and begging for their lives. 2 of them ran out of the residence and were pursued.
Susan Atkins was standing guard on Sharon Tate, and Sharon Tate was crying and begging, please, please let me have my baby. All I want is to have my baby. And Susan Atkins looked her in the eye and said, look, bitch, I don't care a thing about you. I don't care whether you're going to have a baby or not. You're going to die.
They weren't just carrying out Manson's directions. They seemed to enjoy it. They killed with a certain amount of relish or gusto.
As they left, they scrawled the word pig on the front door using Sharon Tate's blood. Early the next morning, the housekeeper found the carnage. The police were called. Mike McGann was one of the first detectives at the scene.
We went through the property. We first saw Stephen Parent, who was slumped over in his vehicle. I saw Voytek Frykowski on the front lawn. He had been badly stabbed many, many times. Abigail Folger was probably 75 feet to the south of him on the lawn. She had been stabbed numerous times. And then we went into the residence, and we observed Sharon Tate, Polanski, and Jay Sebring lying in different positions in the living room portion.
That afternoon, press around the world ran stories about the high-profile Hollywood murders. They called it the crime of the century. Everyone in Los Angeles was terrified.
The sale of guard dogs went up dramatically overnight. Stores that sold firearms in Beverly Hills that would sell 3 or 4 a day suddenly were selling 200 a day. Security services, they were multiplying their personnel.
August 10th, the next night, Manson planned another evening of terror. This time, he joined in. But there was also a new family member along, a former high school homecoming princess, 20-year-old Leslie Van Houten. After several hours of driving around, they finally came to 3301 Waverly Drive, the Labianca home in the Los Feliz area of Los Angeles. 44-year-old Leno Labianca, who owned a chain of small markets in the area, and his second wife, 38-year-old Rosemary, had just returned from their vacation home less than an hour earlier.
Mr. Labianca was on the front sofa reading the Sunday paper while Mrs. Labianca was in the bedroom getting ready for bed, and Manson and Watson came in, got the drop on him, kept Mr. Labianca on the sofa, then brought Mrs. Labianca out, tied their hands, and assured them that they weren't going to be harmed, that this was only a robbery.
Then he comes back to the car and he sends his killers in there. And he told them to make the murders as brutal as they were the previous night. So he sent Tex Watson in, Leslie Van Houten, and Patricia Krenwinkel. And then he, Susan Atkins, and Linda Kasabian drove off. At the time of the murders, they were having a milkshake down the road.
Patricia Krenwinkel, after the murder, carved the word war on his stomach with the carving fork, and then plunged the carving fork into his abdomen. And then Krenwinkel took a towel, dipped it in his blood, wrote the word rise above the inside part of the front door, wrote death to pigs on the living room wall, and wrote helter skelter on the refrigerator.
And then they proceeded to raid the refrigerator, ate after the murders, before they left. And then they hitchhiked back to Spahn Ranch.
Later that night, Rosemary Labianca's son tried to call his mother. There was no answer. Concerned, he and his sister went over to the house and discovered the bloody scene. They called the police and relatives. Alice Labianca was Leno's first wife and the mother of his children.
When we first heard that he had, in fact, been murdered, we were just in such a state of shock. We were all just crying and carrying on, and I was carrying on, and how could this happen, and that sort of thing was pretty crazy.
No hand-me-down clothes, I couldn't rock his kicks. I put down the ball and pick up the pen. As